So we've started this 5-week series called Real Theology. And so today's is Fantastic Beasts and Other Creatures, and just to give you an idea of what this movie is like, we'll just watch the trailer.
You've known for 24 hours that an unregistered wizard set magical beasts loose in New York?
Yes.
Where is this man?
So, you're the guy with the case full of monsters, huh?
News travels fast.
Mr. Scamander, do you know anything about the wizarding community in America? We don't let things loose.
Hey, Mr. English guy! I think your egg is hatching!
You wiped his memory, right? The no magic.
The what?
No magic. The non-wizard.
Sorry, we call them muggles.
I don't think I'm dreaming.
Oh, give it away.
I ain't got the brains to make this up.
Something is stalking our city. Wreaking destruction. And then disappearing without a trace. Witches live among us.
We've lived in the shadows for too long. I ask all of you, who does this protect? Us or them?
Danger. He senses danger.
This is related to Grindelwald's attacks in Europe. This could mean war.
We got a plan, right, guys?
They need our help.
Was that everything that came out of the case?
I won't let another one die.
I refuse to bow down any longer. Time is running out, Mr. Scamander.
Really is an amazing film to watch. The cinematography and all the special effects are quite amazing. This Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them is actually a spin-off from the Harry Potter series, of which we have all heard so much. Can we just get the lights up again? Thanks. The premise comes from the Harry Potter series, where a book called Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them is a textbook that is written by this man, Newt Scamander, who is that fellow right there with the red hair, who's this kind of wizard zoologist for magical creatures. And the story takes place in 1926 New York, decades before Harry Potter even goes to Hogwarts, if you know the Harry Potter stories. The undercurrents of this story, as you probably saw from that trailer, are similar to those that existed in pre-World War II Europe and America, except that this time the tension is between these witches and wizards and magical creatures and no-mages, or humans that have no magical powers. So inside the magic or the wizardry world, there's this governing structure, and those in power have made laws and rules to protect the community from being detected, because they're fearful that if the no-mage humans were aware of their powers, there would be a war, and that would be devastating for both communities. But there are people on either side that are trying to incite violence, and so Mary Lou Barebone is the leader of something called the New Salem Philanthropic Society. She's kind of a street preacher who tries to convince normal folk that these witches and wizards exist and that they are a menace to society and they must be destroyed. And on the other side is Percival Graves, who's trying to incite the humans in order to begin a war that he believes is inevitable but is sure that he will win. He is resentful of the laws which are restricting wizards and witches and their abilities in order to protect the nomad humans. And then the other element of the story is this entity called an obscurus. And if you saw in that train station, there was sort of this cloud that was covering it. Well, the obscurus is a parasite which develops in children that have magical abilities but who are suppressing them in order that they can stay safe. And so eventually the obscurus will take over the child, and it kills the host, and then it wreaks havoc on anything that comes in its way. And this is what is happening when Newt arrives in New York. An obscurus has got loose and is destroying parts of the city, and all the parties are on high alert trying to figure out what is going to happen next. And that is the context in which this story is told. And so in our text today, Jesus has come down from the mountain where he was tempted to abandon his ministry, but where he instead confirmed that this is what God is calling him to be and do. And when he comes down from the mountain, he hears that John the Baptist has been arrested. And if you remember last week, we saw that John the Baptist had baptized Jesus, many believe, into his community. And so Jesus takes on the mantle of John the Baptist and greater than John the Baptist, and he begins his ministry back in Galilee, because that's what the prophets have foretold, that the Messiah's ministry will be out of places in Galilee. So he's walking along the shores of this lake of Galilee, which they call the sea, but it's actually a lake. And he finds Peter and Andrew and James and John. He tells them, "Leave your nets and follow me." And throughout his ministry, Jesus is teaching them and the other disciples which follow him about what it means to live as people of God in the realm of God, which is now amongst them, amongst these people of God, but also in opposition to the realm of Caesar, which is occupying the Jewish territories. And so in this tight-knit community that stays together, they are hearing these stories and learning to live apart from this oppressive culture, right up to the betrayal in the Garden of Gethsemane. Jesus is not without his disciples up until that point. And in this, there is this unity of purpose and this togetherness under one leader. They get confused at times. They don't understand the mission of Jesus. They might quibble a bit between themselves, but they stay together. But then, as we heard in our reading from 1 Corinthians, it's another story a few decades later, because the church begins to expand across the Roman Empire, and they're no longer in these kind of close quarters where they kind of check and balance each other. And so division amongst the followers of Jesus becomes so common that Paul writes to this church in Corinth that to try and settle things down. And he begins his letter entreating them to be of one mind and judgment. And he goes on to note that some of them are following the teachings of Apostle, or were baptized by Apollos, and others say they were followers of Paul, and still others are saying, yeah, but Peter's my man. And then he kind of rebukes them, and he asks them this important question: has the Anointed One, the Messiah, our Jesus whom we follow, has he been split into so many pieces? He reminds them that it is not who baptized you that matters. It is preaching the news of Jesus and the way of Jesus that brings hope to the world, not a baptism. And he finishes this section with these words: "For people who are stumbling toward ruin, the message of the cross is nothing but a tall tale for fools by a fool. But for those of us who are already experiencing the reality of being rescued and made right, it is nothing short of God's power." And so Paul recognizes that the stories of Jesus and our call to follow Jesus can seem to be foolish, naive even to many. This hope and this life where hope is our guide, where justice and peace is our goal, where unconditional love for all, regardless of our gain, is our motivation, where the mystery of God is somehow known to us in the life of Christ, this is foolishness to those who continue to be enthralled with the idea, as they were in Rome's time, that military power is the only way for peace, that acquiescence to political power is the only way to stay safe, that everyone for themselves is the impetus for human development, and what is good for me and my people is the end of all morality. Jesus' message, as preached by Paul, is countercultural. It stands against the narratives of the day and our day, and make our way of living seem foolish and naive. And so then we return to our film, because here you have people who've been gifted, really, with special powers, which they can use for evil or for good. But there is division and dissension about what their true purpose is and how they are supposed to use their powers. And there is this growing fear that they will be exposed. And so they outlaw ownership of fantastic beasts that are really a marvel and a wonder. And they protect themselves out of fear. This fear is so present that some of their children cower at their own power, at who they truly are. And they create a sickness within them that overtakes and is unleashed to bring destruction upon everything that is in their path. And in this state of fear, those who were once unified begin to choose sides, and unity disintegrates, and the arguments within are more damaging than the arguments from without. And in this context steps this Newt Scamander, who is not really a messianic figure, but he carries a fresh perspective where fear of the other, of what is different, is replaced with an openness to difference. And where he is from, those with magic and those without magic live together. And these fantastic magical creatures are wonders to behold, and they're not to be hidden or hunted, but cherished and loved. And he inserts into the darkening clouds of war a bright light that shines on those who are living in fear. And his foolishness frees those who listen and threatens those who resist. I think this is really a story for and of our time. I have to admit, I did not watch the inauguration of President Trump yesterday. I was boycotting in my own little way. It wasn't yesterday, it was Friday. But I did see the pictures of it afterward, and some ways I still can't believe it. And I know that many who voted for him did so because their lives had stagnated, and they were tired of Washington, and they rolled the dice to try and shake things up. But there are others who are white nationalists, who are sick of political correctness, and those who are racist and misogynistic, who also cast their votes for him, and I am still struggling with what that means for us and our society. I like to believe his presidency is not going to affect me, but I hear the stories of those who are afraid and who are living in fear. These are the voices of the dreamers who have spent their lives in the U.S. and they're frightened that they or their family will be deported. And they are the fears of Muslim people who have heard talk of a registry where they'll be forced to defend their choices and their allegiances. And there is fear in the LGBTQ community that marriage equality will be reversed and that those bathroom laws that force transgendered people to use facilities out of sync with their identity, like that in North Carolina, will be copied across the country as it already has in Texas. And women who have fought for equality and reproductive rights are afraid that with the possibility of more than one conservative judge being appointed to the Supreme Court by a President Trump, that Roe v. Wade will be overturned and reproductive choice will be defeated. The press is afraid that their freedoms will be eroded and they will be unable to do their jobs as this administration threatens to leave many mainstream news sources without credentials and move them to a place in the White House where their access to those in power will be curtailed. Others are afraid that free speech will be violated, as even this past weekend, some Canadians were refused entry to the U.S. because they were going to the Women's March. And they were asked if they were for or against Trump. And for us, this week, a certain celebrity businessman declared he was running for the Conservative Party as a candidate who has been called Trump Light, with tough messages that echo what is happening to the South. I can't believe it. Do you hear what I say? And across Europe, right-wing nationalist parties see their support rising, and some have written of how this time is reminiscent of when fascism began to take over many European powers. Those who would capitalize on fear and division are always with us. They promote a scarcity mentality that says there isn't enough for all of us, so we need to take care of ourselves first. And if we are not vigilant, their propaganda reaches our shadow selves, the parts of us that fear the other, the instinctive self-preservation that hunkers down to protect only those closest to us. The suspicions towards those who don't look or act or believe like we do, these are the parts of our nature that are always present. They were in Paul's time, they were in Jesus' time, and they are here today. But into this threat of darkness, a light has shone. And hope has come from hopelessness. That is the promise of our gospel text. And into this scarcity mentality, we are reminded that there is enough, that we are enough, that we are called to love and to unity and not division. And against all odds, at a time where a bunker mentality seems like a viable option, we see men and women around the world of all ethnicities, orientation, faiths, and families rise up and join in the Women's March to declare that we are not alone and we will not give in to fear. And in a groundswell of grassroots activism, they marched together to prove that they are stronger together. And millions of people across the US, in Canada, and around the world declared that they will not give in to fear or intimidation or despair. I'm reminded of those words of Martin Luther King. The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. And in this march, they declared that they will not retreat in the face of opposition, but will continue to bend that arc towards justice and equality for all. And I believe there is a lesson for us in this rising, because as followers of Jesus, we are meant to be that light that comes out of the darkness. We are called to bring a new perspective, even though that perspective seems like foolishness to some. We are not to be divided by meaningless things like how we were baptized or who taught us or whether our theology is liberal or conservative. When we dwell on those things, we are weak and fragmented. Following Jesus is not the path of least resistance. It is a path where healing and wholeness and wonder and awe are bountiful and available for everyone. And when we stand together as disciples of this anointed one, this Jesus, and we shine our light for all to see, we cover the earth with hope. Jesus says, "Come, leave your nets, find a new way. Follow me, and I will teach you how to gather the people of the world to change everything." May we live into that calling. Amen. And so I invite you to